Until now, there has been no time to deal with emotion. But with the airspace clear, the enormity of what has happened, the staggering loss of life, hits home.
I broke down. I mean, I broke down.
At Boston Center, Pete Zalewski, the first controller to handle a hijacked plane, maintaining composure throughout it all, he finally falls apart.
I started crying. I couldn't talk. I started shaking. And I just said, what's wrong with the world? What is happening?
There is more bad news for the Boston Center. One of the controller's wives actually had been on the American Flight 11, the first plane to hit the World Trade Tower.
Doug McKay's wife was on American 11. And
was he on duty?
Doug was actually on his way to work. Doug had dropped his wife off at the airport.
The individuals that worked with Doug the evening before knew that his wife was going to be on American 11, and when they found out that American 11 had hit the towers, we stopped Doug at the door, and we basically took him aside and brought him into another room, and we went through taking care of Doug. And it was pretty tragic.
That is part of the brotherhood and sisterhood, isn't it? You have to take care of each other as well as take care of all those airplanes.
It sure is.
And on that day, we lost Doug McKay also. He could never work again, not doing what he was doing before.
The skies over America would ultimately remain closed down for 3 days to civilian aircraft. When flights resumed,
yes,
and controllers came back on duty in this room after September 11th, what was the tone?
very somber. We were more worried about what it done to our industry. This is our industry. The pilots, the controllers, the users, they've taken our industry and turned it into a complete mess that nobody ever imagined.
For many controllers, the coming days and weeks were harder still. Each shift a waiting game, with controllers wondering, will there be a next time? And if there is, will we be able to stop it?
Every little thing that happened, I was jumping up.
And any tiny little glitch would cause it.
Stress was enormous.
For Pete Zalewski, it was difficult to come back at all.
For about a month, I didn't sleep. I was out of work for about 6 weeks, but I knew there was a point where I would go back. I needed my life back.
Even before 9/11, controllers in New York were no strangers to tragedy. The crashes of TWA Flight 800, Swiss Air Flight 111, and Egypt Air 990 all happened in or around their airspace. And within weeks of September 11th, tragedy would strike again when another American plane, Flight 587, crashes on takeoff into a neighborhood in Queens.
Were you working that day?
Yes, yes.
What did you think when you heard that?
I thought terrorism. It had to be. Everyone was kind of waiting for the next shoe to drop. And I think everyone thought, well, all right, we're in the next phase of whatever it is they have in store for us.
But investigators now believe a failure of structure, not terrorism, caused the crash of American Flight 587 in Queens. While a year has now safely passed, the shadow of September 11th still hangs over them.
Every time an aircraft doesn't do exactly what you tell them, it brings up the thought of what could happen now. And what's going to happen, what is he doing, why is he doing this, why is he not answering, and it brings it right back, every time.
How much do you worry about the new rules that fighter aircraft may have to shoot down a civilian airliner at some point? Hard to imagine, isn't it?
Yeah. If it's hard for us, can you imagine how hard it is for that fighter pilot?
Decision he has to make.
Have you been briefed about those contingencies?
We have contingency plans that we've been briefed on.
Told to keep it secret?
Pretty much, yeah. We'd have to kill you if you did.
Well, let's not go that far. But that's a stark new reality in your life, Greg, that an American fighter jet might have to shoot down an airliner filled with civilians because it's been converted into a weapon by someone.
Exactly, right.
It's not only planes as weapons, but we're also watching out for sensitive areas such as nuclear power plants, you know, large stadiums, reservoirs.
Yeah, bridges and stuff.
And that's added a new dimension to our job. And we feel that we are every bit a part of this nation's defense when it comes to the skies as anybody else. Because, you know, we're going to be the first line there.
As today's anniversary approached, Most of these controllers have shied away from even reading about it or watching the coverage on television.
Stay away. I already know too much, because as I watched the American disappear, the United disappeared. And those were the first two. And I guess I'm the first one to know it.
It's an honor you'd rather give up, though, right?
Absolutely. I just think about all those people and all the brave people that died there.
He remains in awe of the timing of it all.
How did they do such a coordinated thing that the American literally disappeared and the United literally got hijacked at almost the same time? And I've always wondered if they were actually talking to each other, saying, I'm going in now, good luck.
It's the what-ifs that plague the Newark controllers. What if those fighter jets scrambled to intercept the second plane had arrived just a bit earlier?
I remember the two F-15s. They were there moments after the impact. And I said to myself, if they only could have gotten there a couple minutes earlier. They just missed it.
But what would they have done?
What do you think they would have done?
I don't know what they have done.
You know, 20/20 hindsight.
They probably would have had to shoot it down.
But back then, that only came from the president.
Right.
Yeah.
What if Flight 93, delayed so long on the runway at Newark that morning, had been delayed just a few minutes more?
It happened a few minutes later. May not have made it off the ground. It may not have made it at all, unfortunately.
Each of them struggles with personal memories, moments, images, seared into their consciousness. They will never forget them.
I still can hear their voice. That will never go away from me. But just horrific, just the feeling of it, the voices, you knew they had control. You knew they had control, and we didn't. And that was very scary, because as controllers, you're taught to have control, and there was none that day.
They were the 4 darkest hours in aviation history. But these controllers and their colleagues across the U.S. met an unprecedented challenge that morning 1 year ago. Their coolness kept other tragedies from occurring, ensuring the safety of more than 350,000 people in the air and countless more on the ground.
I know you have professional pride, but when you look back, aren't you a little astonished that it went as well as it did?
The people that work in that day did a phenomenal job. I mean, the controls in this country are the best in the world, and I'm proud to be one of them.
The men and women with whom we have spent the last hour and their colleagues in air traffic control centers across the country are much more on our minds now. We used to take them for granted. No more. Now we have an insider's appreciation of their critical role in getting us off the ground and headed safely to our destinations, or in times of national emergency, out of the air and back safely on the ground. September 11th was at once the blackest day in their profession and the proudest. It was not their fault the airliners were hijacked, but it was their coolness and resourcefulness that cleared the air and kept other planes from mid-air crashes. And as we learned tonight, they did it with heart. We can't ask for more.